Park Dong-min pushed his cleaning cart down the long metal hallway deep inside the space station. The wheels made a soft squeaking sound that echoed off the walls. He had been working these dark tunnels for 20 years now. Every day was the same. Clean the floors, empty the trash, fix broken lights, and try to stay out of everyone's way. The space station called New Seoul floated high above a distant planet. Thousands of people lived and worked here, but most of them never saw Dong-min. He was just the janitor who kept the lower levels clean. The important people stayed on the upper floors where the offices and fancy restaurants were. Down here in the maintenance tunnels, it was just him and the humming machines that kept the station running. Dong-min was 55 years old and walked with a small limp from an old injury. His hair was gray now and his hands were rough from years of hard work. He lived alone in a tiny room and had no family. The only sounds he heard most days were the machines and his own footsteps. Today felt different, though. As he rounded a corner near the water recycling plant, he heard something strange. It was a soft crying sound like a hurt animal might make. Dong-min stopped walking and listened carefully. The sound came again, weaker this time. He left his cart by the wall and followed the sound deeper into the tunnel. Past the big water pipes and around the power cables, the crying got louder. It was coming from behind some old storage boxes that nobody had moved in years. Dong-min pushed the boxes aside and found something that made him rub his eyes in surprise. Curled up in the corner was a small creature unlike anything he had ever seen. It was about the size of a house cat, but looked nothing like any animal from Earth. The creature had smooth scales that changed color from purple to blue as it breathed. Two small wings were folded against its back, and its eyes were large and bright like jewels. One wing hung at a wrong angle, and there was a cut on its side that leaked silver blood. Around its neck was a collar made of some strange metal with symbols that glowed softly. The little creature looked at Dong-min with those big eyes. It was clearly scared and in pain. When Dong-min took a step closer, it tried to crawl further into the corner but was too weak to move much. Dong-min had seen many hurt things in his life. During his time as a soldier, before he became a janitor, he had helped wounded people. He knew what suffering looked like. This small creature was definitely suffering. He slowly took off his work jacket and knelt down. Speaking in a soft voice, he said, "Hey there, little one. I am not going to hurt you." The creature made a small musical sound, almost like singing. It stopped trying to hide and watched Dong-min carefully. Very gently, he wrapped his jacket around the creature. It was warm to the touch, warmer than any earth animal should be. As Dong-min carefully picked up the wounded creature, he felt something strange in his chest. It was a feeling he had not had in many years. It reminded him of when his daughter was little, before she died in the war. A feeling of wanting to protect something small and helpless. The creature became quiet in his arms, too tired to fight anymore. Dong-min could feel its heart beating fast through the jacket. He looked around to make sure no one was watching, then carried his new friend back to his cart. Getting to his quarters without being seen was not easy. The security cameras watched everything, but Dong-min knew which hallways they could not see. He had learned these hidden paths during his 20 years of cleaning. Station security barely noticed janitors anyway. They looked right through him like he was invisible. His room was small and plain. Just a bed, a desk, and a few personal things. He cleared off his workbench and made a soft nest from clean rags and a heating pad. The creature stayed unconscious as he gently placed it in the makeshift bed. Now that he could see it clearly under the lights, Dong-min was amazed by how beautiful it was. The scales had tiny patterns like fingerprints, and the wings had thin membranes that looked almost transparent. Even hurt and sleeping, there was something noble about the way it held itself. The wing was definitely broken. Dong-min had set broken bones before during his soldier days. This was different because it was a wing instead of an arm or leg, but the basic idea was the same. He found some thin wire and soft padding and very carefully made a tiny splint. The cut on the creature's side was not too deep, but it needed to be cleaned. Dong-min used sterile water and medical gel from his first aid kit. The creature's skin felt like warm leather, and its temperature was much higher than a human's would be. While he worked, Dong-min talked quietly to keep the creature calm, even though it was unconscious. "You are going to be okay, little friend. I do not know what you are or where you came from, but you are safe now." The creature's breathing was fast and shallow. Dong-min knew it was probably in shock from the injuries and being in a strange place. He dimmed the lights and sat in his chair to watch over his patient. As the hours passed, Dongmin found himself really looking at the creature for the first time in years that did not involve cleaning or fixing things. The way its scales caught the light was beautiful. The shape of its head was elegant, almost like artwork. Even sleeping, it seemed intelligent in a way that most animals did not. Around midnight, the creature stirred slightly and made that musical sound again. Its eyes opened just a crack and looked directly at Dongmin. For a moment, they stared at each other across the small room. Then the creature closed its eyes and went back to sleep. Dongmin smiled for the first time in months. Tomorrow he would have to figure out what to do next, but tonight he would just make sure his new friend stayed safe and warm. After 20 years of being invisible and alone, he finally had someone who needed him. Outside his small window, the stars continued their eternal dance around the space station, unaware that something important had just begun in one tiny room far below. Dongmin woke up before his alarm clock, just like every morning for the past 20 years. But today was different. Instead of getting ready for work right away, he quietly walked over to check on his small patient. The creature was awake and watching him with those bright eyes. When it saw Dongmin approaching, it made a soft chirping sound that was almost like a greeting. The little being tried to stand up but was still too weak. Its broken wing trembled with the effort. "Easy there, little one," Dongmin said in a gentle voice. "You need to rest and get better first." He filled a small cup with clean water and held it near the creature's mouth. At first it turned its head away, not understanding what Dongmin wanted. But when a drop of water touched its lips, the creature's eyes went wide. It was clearly very thirsty. Dongmin helped it drink slowly, just a few drops at a time. The creature's tongue was bright blue and felt warm against his fingers. After drinking, it looked at him with what seemed like gratitude and made that musical chirping sound again. Before leaving for work, Dongmin checked the splint on the wing and the bandage on the cut. Both looked good. The creature watched everything he did with great interest, as if it was trying to understand what was happening. "I have to go to work now," Dongmin explained, even though he knew the creature could not understand his words. "But I will be back this afternoon. Try to rest." The creature tilted its head to one side like it was listening carefully to his voice. Those intelligent eyes followed him as he gathered his cleaning supplies and left the room. Work that day felt longer than usual. Dongmin found himself thinking about the creature instead of focusing on his cleaning duties. He rushed through, mopping the floors and emptying the trash cans. All he wanted was to get back to his room and check on his patient. When he returned, the creature was sitting up in its makeshift bed. It had grown slightly bigger, now about the size of a small dog. Its scales looked brighter too, shifting from deep purple to brilliant blue as the light changed. "You look much better," Dongmin said with a smile. The creature chirped happily in response. This time, when he offered water, the creature drank on its own. Dongmin also tried offering small pieces of the protein bars he ate for lunch. The creature sniffed them carefully before taking tiny bites. It seemed to like the food, eating slowly but steadily. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Each morning, Dongmin would check on the creature and give it food and water. Each evening, he would return to find it a little stronger and a little bigger. The cut on its side was healing well, and the broken wing was starting to move more naturally. The creature was clearly very intelligent. It learned quickly that the sound of Dongmin's footsteps in the hallway meant he was coming home. By the third day, it would start chirping excitedly as soon as it heard him approaching. Dongmin began talking to the creature while he worked on his hobby of fixing old electronic devices. He had always been good with his hands, and repairing broken things helped him relax after long days of cleaning. "I used to have a daughter," he told the creature one evening while fixing a broken tablet computer. "Her name was Sujin, and she had bright eyes just like yours. She died when she was only 10 years old during the colony wars." The creature listened intently, its head tilted to one side. Sometimes it would make soft sounds, as if it was trying to respond to his stories. "I became a janitor after that," Dongmin continued. "Seemed safer to stay invisible, to not get close to anyone or anything that could be taken away." The creature moved closer to him on the workbench, carefully avoiding the small tools and broken electronics. It gently touched his hand with its nose, and Dongmin felt a warm sensation spread through his chest. "But maybe being alone is not always the best choice," he said quietly. By the end of the first week, the creature was almost fully healed. It could extend both wings without pain, though it still could not fly in the small room. It had grown to the size of a medium dog, and its scales now shimmered with colors that seemed to change based on its mood. Dongmin noticed that the strange collar around the creature's neck sometimes flashed with different symbols. The patterns meant nothing to him, but they seemed important. The collar itself was made of a metal he had never seen before, smooth and warm to the touch. The creature had also started making more complex sounds. Instead of just chirping, it would produce series of musical notes that sounded almost like a language. Dongmin found himself trying to copy the sounds, and the creature seemed pleased when he got them right. One evening, as Dongmin was getting ready for bed, the creature did something unexpected. It climbed down from the workbench and walked over to where Dongmin was sitting on his narrow bed. Without hesitation, it curled up next to him and began making a deep rumbling sound like a cat purring, but much more musical. Dongmin was surprised by how natural it felt to have the creature close to him. He gently stroked its scales, marveling at how smooth and warm they were. The creature's purring grew louder, and Dongmin felt more peaceful than he had in years. "I think you need a name," he said softly. "How about Hanul? It means sky, and you have wings like you belong in the sky." The creature looked up at him and made a sound that seemed almost like agreement. From that moment on, Hanul became more than just a patient Dongmin was caring for. The little dragon, for that was clearly what it was, had become his friend. As they settled down to sleep that night, Dongmin realized that his lonely life had changed completely in just 1 week. He had someone who needed him, someone who seemed to actually enjoy his company. For the first time since his daughter died, he felt like he had a family again. But he also knew that this peaceful time could not last forever. Sooner or later, someone would discover Hanul, and then everything would change once more. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning during Dongmin's 3rd week of caring for Hanul. He was getting ready for work when loud footsteps echoed in the hallway outside his room. These were not the soft steps of other maintenance workers. These were the heavy boots of security guards. Dongmin froze as he heard his door's lock being overridden from the outside. Hanul, who was now the size of a large dog with scales that gleamed like jewels, immediately sensed danger. The dragon moved protectively in front of Dongmin and began making a low growling sound he had never heard before. The door slid open with a sharp hiss. Security Chief Kim Jae-hyun stepped into the room with 2 armed guards behind him. Jae-hyun was a stern man with cold eyes who had never spoken to Dongmin in all his years on the station. Now those eyes were fixed on Hanul with a mixture of surprise and suspicion. "Maintenance worker Park Dongmin," Jae-hyun said in an official voice. "You are in violation of station safety protocols. You are harboring an unknown alien life form without proper authorization." Dongmin stepped in front of Hanul, even though the dragon was now almost as tall as his waist. The creature was hurt and dying. I could not just leave it alone. "That decision was not yours to make," Jae-hyun replied sharply. "This station has strict rules about alien contact. Every unknown species must be reported immediately to the science department." Hanul's growling grew deeper, and the temperature in the small room began to rise noticeably. The dragon's eyes started glowing with an inner light that had not been there before. The 2 guards nervously adjusted their grip on their weapons. "Look at it," Dongmin said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Hanul is not dangerous. It is intelligent and gentle. It has been living peacefully in my room for weeks." "Hanul?" Jae-hyun raised an eyebrow. "You named it? This makes the situation even worse. You have formed an emotional attachment to an alien species of unknown origin and capabilities." One of the guards stepped forward with a large containment box made of clear metal. "Sir, should we proceed with capture?" The moment Hanul saw the box, the dragon became very agitated. It pressed closer to Dongmin and made a series of urgent musical sounds that seemed almost like words. The collar around its neck began flashing rapidly with symbols that pulsed in rhythm with its calls. "It is trying to communicate," Dongmin observed. "Can you not see that Hanul is trying to tell us something important?" Jae-hyun looked unmoved. "Our xenobiology team will study its communication patterns. Dr. Lee Min-seo is already preparing a secure laboratory for examination." "Examination?" Dongmin felt his heart sink. "You mean experiments?" "We mean scientific study," Jae-hyun corrected. "We need to understand what this creature is, where it came from, and whether it poses any threat to station security." Hanul seemed to understand what was happening even without knowing the human language. The dragon looked up at Dongmin with those intelligent eyes and made a sound that was clearly distressed. It touched Dongmin's hand with its nose, just like it had done every evening when they settled down together. "Please," Dongmin said quietly, "do not separate us. Hanul trusts me. It will be scared and confused without someone familiar nearby. The creature's emotional state is not our primary concern," Jae-hyun stated. "Station security comes first. Step aside, Dongmin." When Dongmin did not move, both guards raised their weapons. The threat was clear. Hanul's eyes blazed brighter, and small wisps of what looked like glowing mist began flowing from its nostrils. The dragon was preparing to defend itself, and Dongmin. "Do not make this harder than necessary," Jae-hyun warned. "We have no desire to harm either of you, but we will use force if required." Dongmin looked down at Hanul, who was trembling with fear and anger. The last thing he wanted was for his friend to get hurt, trying to protect him. Slowly, reluctantly, he stepped to one side. "I am sorry, Hanul," he whispered. "I am so sorry." The guards approached carefully with the containment box. Hanul backed away from them but did not try to fight. Instead, the dragon kept looking at Dongmin with an expression that seemed to say it understood this was not his choice. As they guided Hanul into the clear container, the dragon began making those complex musical sounds again. The patterns were more urgent now, more desperate. It pressed against the walls of the box, trying to reach Dongmin. "It is trying to tell you something important," Dongmin said to Jae-hyun. "Those sounds are not random. They have meaning." "Dr. Park Young-soo in linguistics will analyze the sound patterns," Jae-hyun replied. "If there is a message, we will decode it." But as they prepared to leave with Hanul, something strange happened. The dragon's collar began flashing in a new pattern, much faster and brighter than before. The symbols on it changed from the usual blue glow to a brilliant red. At the same time, Hanul threw back its head and let out a long, loud call that echoed through the station's corridors. The sound was unlike anything any of them had heard before. It was musical, but also powerful, carrying harmonics that seemed to vibrate through the metal walls themselves. Every person on the station could hear it, from the command center to the deepest maintenance tunnels. "What was that?" one of the guards asked nervously. Jae-hyun frowned as his communication device began buzzing with reports from across the station. "Unknown, but we need to get this creature to the lab immediately for analysis." As they carried Hanul away, the dragon continued calling out in that strange, musical language. The sounds grew fainter as they moved down the corridor, but Dongmin could still hear them echoing through the station's ventilation system. Left alone in his room, Dongmin sat heavily on his bed. The space felt empty and cold without Hanul's warm presence, but something told him that the dragon's final call had not been a cry of despair. It had sounded more like a signal, a message sent to someone far away. Outside his small window, the stars continued their eternal dance. But Dongmin could not shake the feeling that somewhere among those distant lights, something had heard Hanul's call and was already beginning to respond. 3 weeks passed like a nightmare for Dongmin. Security Chief Kim Jae-hyun had confined him to his quarters except for supervised trips to get food. 2 guards watched him whenever he left his room. They said it was for his own safety, but Dongmin knew it was really to keep him away from Hanul. Nobody would tell him how his dragon friend was doing. When he asked the guards, they just shook their heads and said the information was classified. Dr. Lee Min-seo from the science department had taken Hanul to a secure laboratory on the upper levels of the station. Dongmin had no way of knowing if Hanul was healthy, scared, or even still alive. The loneliness was worse than anything he had felt since his daughter died. For 3 wonderful weeks, he had rediscovered what it meant to care for someone. Now that someone had been taken away and he was powerless to help, he spent his days staring out his small window at the stars, wondering if he would ever see Hanul again. On the 21st day of his confinement, Dongmin was awakened by alarms screaming throughout the station. Red warning lights flashed in his room as the automated announcement system activated. "All personnel report to emergency stations immediately. Unknown vessels detected approaching the station." "This is not a drill." "Repeat, this is not a drill." Dongmin pressed his face against his window and looked out into space. At first he saw nothing unusual among the familiar stars. Then slowly, shapes began moving against the black background. They were enormous, larger than any ships he had ever seen. But these were not metal spacecraft built in shipyards. The approaching vessels looked alive. They moved with grace and purpose, their surfaces seeming to pulse with their own inner light. As they came closer, Dongmin could see that they resembled gigantic versions of Hanul. They had the same elegant shape, the same flowing lines, but they were the size of battleships and seemed to be made of living metal and energy. The station shuddered as something made contact with the outer hull. The lights flickered and Dongmin heard the deep groaning sound of metal under stress. Then came a noise that made his heart race with recognition. It was the same musical language that Hanul had used, but amplified thousands of times and carrying harmonics that seemed to vibrate through the station's very bones. Suddenly, his door hissed open. The electronic lock had been overridden, but not by station security. Standing in the doorway was a figure that took Dongmin's breath away. It was Hanul, but not the small dragon he had nursed back to health. This was a magnificent creature the size of a horse, with scales that gleamed like polished gemstones. The broken wing had healed perfectly, and both wings were now spread wide in a display of power and beauty. The dragon's eyes still held the same intelligence and warmth that Dongmin remembered, but now they also showed a confidence and strength that had not been there before. Behind Hanul stood two beings in what looked like armor that moved and flowed like living tissue. They were humanoid in shape but clearly not human. Their faces were noble and stern with features that suggested great age and wisdom. When they looked at Dongmin, their eyes held the same intelligence he had seen in Hanul. Hanul approached him slowly, just as it had during those first careful days in his quarters. When the dragon touched its nose to his hand, Dongmin felt a rush of emotions and images that were not his own. Joy at seeing him again, gratitude for the care he had given, and something else that felt like respect and affection combined. "You came back," Dongmin whispered, stroking the familiar scales that were now so much more brilliant than before. Hanul made a complex sound that somehow conveyed the meaning of always without using human words. One of the armored beings stepped forward and spoke in accented but clear human language. "You are Park Dongmin, the one who showed kindness to our youngling when we could not protect them." Dongmin nodded, still overwhelmed by seeing Hanul again. "Is that what you call Hanul? A youngling?" "Among our people, yes. I am called Wu Jinho, Herald of the Crimson Flight. We have traveled far to retrieve our child, but also to meet the human who preserved their life when they were lost and helpless." The second being spoke, her voice carrying the same musical quality as Hanul's communications. "I am Nam Su-jin, flight leader of the Azure Wing. Our youngling has told us much about you through the bond you share." "Bond?" Dongmin looked confused. Jinho smiled, an expression that was both alien and somehow familiar. "Dragons do not give their trust easily, Park Dongmin. When our youngling chose to accept your care and protection, a connection was formed that goes deeper than simple friendship. You are now bonded to our flight, whether you understand it or not." The station shook again and more alarms began sounding. Through his window, Dongmin could see security ships launching from the station's docking bays. They looked tiny and fragile compared to the massive dragon vessels that surrounded them. "Your people are frightened," Su-jin observed. "They see our arrival as an attack. Are you attacking?" Dongmin asked. "We came for our youngling," Jinho replied. "But your station's leaders took them from you and subjected them to painful tests and isolation. They treated our child like a laboratory specimen rather than a living, thinking being." Hanul moved closer to Dongmin and made a soft sound of distress. Through their strange connection, Dongmin could sense memories of bright lights, cold metal tables, and the loneliness of being cut off from any friendly contact. The scientists had not been cruel on purpose, but they had not understood what they were dealing with. "They were trying to understand," Dongmin said quietly. "Humans fear what they do not know, as do all species," Su-jin acknowledged. "But fear must not lead to cruelty, especially toward the young and innocent." More sounds echoed through the station as security teams moved through the corridors. Dongmin could hear shouting and the heavy footsteps of armed guards rushing toward their location. "What happens now?" he asked. Jinho and Su-jin exchanged a look that seemed to carry entire conversations. Finally, Jinho spoke again. "That depends partly on you, Park Dongmin. Our youngling does not wish to leave you behind, and we have learned to respect their choices. But we also cannot allow them to be imprisoned and studied again. We offer an alternative," Su-jin added. "Come with us and learn about our people, or stay here and help us teach your people that we are not enemies to be feared." Hanul looked at Dongmin with those bright, intelligent eyes and made an encouraging sound. The dragon was clearly hoping he would choose to stay and help bridge the gap between their two species. Before Dongmin could answer, The door to his quarters burst open, and Security Chief Kim Jae-hyun rushed in with a squad of heavily armed guards. When they saw the dragons, all of them stopped short, their weapons raised but their faces showing uncertainty and fear. "Nobody move," Jae-hyun commanded, though his voice shook slightly. "You are all under arrest." The command center of New Seoul Station had never seen anything like this before. Captain Lee Sang-wook stood at the head of the main table, trying to look calm while facing 3 dragon riders who had requested a formal meeting. The dragons themselves waited outside in the docking bay, too large to fit inside the station's corridors. Dongmin sat uncomfortably in a chair that was much too fancy for someone like him. He still could not believe he was in the command center with all the senior officers. Just a month ago, none of these people would have noticed him if he had been cleaning the floor right next to them. Woo Jin-ho and Nam Soo-jin sat across from the humans, their living armor slowly shifting colors in the bright lights. Between them sat a 3rd dragon rider named Park Ki-tae, who had introduced himself as the elder speaker for the entire dragon fleet. His presence made it clear that this meeting was very important to the dragon people. "Let me make sure I understand the situation correctly," Captain Sang-wook said carefully. "You brought a military fleet to our station to rescue one injured youngling." Ki-tae smiled, and when he did, his teeth gleamed like pearls. "Captain, what you see outside is not a military fleet. It is a single-family group searching for a lost child. Our actual battle fleets contain thousands of vessels. The silence that followed was heavy and uncomfortable. Dr. Lee Min-seo, who had been studying Hanul for 3 weeks, shifted nervously in her chair. "We meant no harm to the youngling. We were following standard scientific procedures." "Your standard procedures nearly killed our child," Soo-jin replied, her voice cold but controlled. 3 weeks of isolation, bright lights, and painful tests. The youngling was refusing to eat and had stopped communicating entirely. "We did not know it was intelligent," Dr. Min-seo protested. "It showed no signs of higher reasoning during our initial examinations." Jin-ho leaned forward. "Because you separated it from its bonded companion. Dragons cannot thrive alone, especially younglings. They need emotional connection to remain healthy and responsive." All eyes turned to Dongmin, who felt his face growing red with embarrassment. "I just took care of it because it was hurt," he said quietly. "I did not know about any bond or that it was so important." "That is exactly why the bond formed," Ki-tae explained. "You showed kindness without expecting anything in return. You protected something helpless when you could have ignored it or turned it over to authorities. Such actions are rare among any species." Captain Sang-wook cleared his throat. "While we appreciate your explanation, we have a larger concern. Our sensors show more than 50 of your vessels in the area. Our government will view this as an invasion force." "Your government has good reason to be concerned," Ki-tae said seriously. "But not about us. What do you mean?" the captain asked. Ki-tae and his companions exchanged glances. Finally, the elder speaker continued. "Tell me, Captain, have you lost contact with any of your outer colonies recently?" Captain Sang-wook's face went pale. "That information is classified. The Kepler 438 mining station went silent 2 months ago," Ki-tae stated. "Your colony on Ross 128 stopped transmitting 6 weeks ago. The research outpost at Wolf 359 disappeared entirely 3 weeks ago." The command center erupted in surprised voices. This information was supposed to be known only to the highest levels of command. Several officers began talking at once until Captain Sang-wook called for silence. "How could you possibly know about classified military operations?" demanded Security Chief Kim Jae-hyun. "Because we have been fighting the same enemy for 300 years, Soo-jin answered. "The creatures you call the Devourers have been moving through this sector, consuming everything in their path." Dr. Min-seo looked confused. "Devourers? We have no records of any species by that name." "You know them by other names," Jin-ho explained. "The Dark Fleet, the Hungry Ones, the ships that leave nothing behind but empty space and radiation." Commander Park Young-mi, the station's military advisor, leaned forward. "Are you talking about the unidentified vessels that have been detected near our border systems?" "We are talking about an ancient enemy that feeds on energy itself," Ki-tae said grimly. "They consume entire planets, leaving behind only dead rock and empty space. They have destroyed countless civilizations across the galaxy." "Why should we believe you?" Jae-hyun asked suspiciously. Instead of answering with words, Ki-tae activated a small device on the table. Holographic images filled the air above them, showing scenes of destruction that made everyone gasp. Planets stripped of all life, space stations torn apart and drifting in pieces, ships that looked like they had been dissolved from the inside out. This is what remains of the Altair system, Kitai said quietly. 2 billion people lived there last year. Now there is nothing but dust and radiation. The images changed, showing massive dark ships that seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. They moved through space like hungry shadows, leaving destruction in their wake. The Devourers adapt quickly, Sujin continued. Every time we develop new weapons or defenses, they learn to counter them. We have been retreating slowly across the galaxy for centuries. But you have been fighting them successfully, Captain Sang-wook observed. You are still here. We survived because we learned to work together, Jinho explained. Different dragon flights, different clans, all united against a common threat. But even united, we are not strong enough to stop them completely. Kitai looked directly at Dongmin. Your species shows promise. The bond between a human and one of our younglings has never happened before. It suggests that our peoples might be able to work together in ways we never imagined. What exactly are you proposing? Captain Sang-wook asked. An alliance, Kaite said simply. We teach you to fight the Devourers. You share your technology and tactical knowledge with us. Together we might be able to do what neither of us can accomplish alone. And in return, your colonies stop disappearing. Your people survive what is coming. Dr. Mincio raised her hand nervously. What would this alliance mean for the youngling and Mr. Park? Sujin smiled for the first time since the meeting began. They would become our first ambassador pair. The youngling would remain here as a representative of our people, and Park Dongmin would learn to communicate with and care for dragons. Me? Dongmin asked in surprise. But I am just a janitor. I do not know anything about diplomacy or aliens. You know the most important thing, Kite replied. You know how to show kindness to something different from yourself. Everything else can be learned. Through the large windows of the command center, they could see Hanul playing in the docking bay with several younger dragons. The sight of the magnificent creatures moving gracefully through the artificial gravity was both beautiful and surreal. Captain Sang-wook was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing the enormous decision before him. Finally, he spoke. I will need to contact Earth Command before making any commitments. This is far beyond my authority to decide. Of course, Kite agreed. But Captain, the Devourers will not wait for your bureaucracy to make up its mind. They are already moving toward your core systems. How long do we have? Commander Youngmi asked. Kaite's expression was grave. Based on their current pattern of movement, perhaps 6 months before they reach your major population centers. The weight of that statement settled over the room like a heavy blanket. 6 months to prepare for an enemy that had been destroying civilizations for centuries. Captain Sang-wook looked at Dongmin, who was still staring out at Hanul with wonder and affection. What do you think, Mr. Park? Are you willing to help build a bridge between our peoples? Dongmin thought about his empty life before he found Hanul. Then he thought about his daughter, who had died because humans had not been strong enough to protect her from war. If it means keeping people safe, he said quietly, then yes, I will do whatever I can to help. 6 months had changed everything for Dongmin. The quiet janitor who once cleaned maintenance tunnels now stood on the bridge of the human battleship Sol Prime, wearing armor that had been specially designed by dragon engineers. Hanul had grown even larger and more magnificent, now easily the size of an earth elephant but graceful as a bird in flight. The transformation had not been easy. Learning to communicate properly with dragons required more than just understanding their musical language. It meant opening his mind to thoughts and emotions that were not his own. The bond between him and Hanul had deepened until they could share feelings and even some thoughts without speaking at all. Around them, the combined human-dragon fleet prepared for the largest battle in either species' history. 50 human ships flew alongside 200 dragon vessels, their crews working together with coordination that would have been impossible just months before. Admiral Kim Tae-jin stood at the command center, his uniform now bearing both human and dragon symbols. The integration between the two species had happened faster than anyone expected. Humans had quickly learned dragon techniques for faster space travel and energy manipulation. Dragons had adopted human strategies for large-scale battle coordination and logistics. Enemy fleet detected at the edge of the system, reported Communications Officer Han Yu-jin. Preliminary count shows over 300 Devourer vessels approaching. Through the bridge's large windows, Dong Min could see the approaching enemy. The Devourer ships were nightmares made real, looking like pieces of space itself had been twisted into predatory shapes. They moved with purpose and hunger, their dark hulls seeming to absorb the light from nearby stars. "Dragonflights report ready for combat," announced another officer. "All human vessels confirm weapons charged and shields at maximum." Admiral Tae-jin looked at Dong Min. "Are you and Hanul prepared for this?" Dong Min nodded, though his heart was beating fast with nervousness. Hanul says the younglings are excited to prove themselves in real battle. The older dragons are confident but cautious. Through their bond, Dong Min could feel Hanul's emotions. The dragon was not afraid, but there was a deep determination and protectiveness that reminded Dong Min of how he had felt when caring for the injured youngling months ago. Now Hanul was protecting him and everyone else they cared about. "Devourer ships are entering weapons range," Yujin reported. "They are forming attack patterns." "Begin the attack," Admiral Tae-jin ordered. All units engage the enemy. The battle that followed was unlike anything Dong Min had ever imagined. He rode on Hanul's back as they flew through space, part of a formation of 30 dragon riders led by Sujin herself. Moving through vacuum on dragonback still felt impossible, but he had learned to stop questioning the magic that dragons seemed to carry with them. Around them, the battle raged in 3 dimensions. Human ships, now equipped with dragon-designed shields and weapons, engaged the smaller Devourer vessels while the dragons themselves attacked the massive bioships that served as the enemy's primary weapons. Hanul's voice touched his mind, warm and fierce despite the chaos around them. "Ready, bonded friend?" "Always ready," Dongmin replied, checking his weapon harness one final time. They dove toward a Devourer cruiser whose surface writhed with what looked like hungry mouths lined with crystalline teeth. The bioship turned to track their approach, launching projectiles that moved like living creatures through space. Hanul exhaled, and the space around them erupted in brilliant fire that was not quite fire. Dragon breath was something more fundamental than mere heat or energy. It attacked the very structure of matter itself, unmaking the bonds that held the enemy ship together. The Devourer vessel tried to adapt its defenses, but dragon fire was not something that could be easily countered. The bioship began to dissolve from the inside out, its hull cracking and releasing clouds of dark vapor into space. As they wheeled away from the dying enemy ship, Dongmin caught sight of the human flagship. Sol Prime was coordinating the entire fleet with precision that impressed even the dragons. Admiral Tae-jin had learned to think like both a human commander and a dragon flight leader, combining the best of both tactical traditions. But the Devourers were not helpless prey. As the battle continued, they began to adapt to the combined human-dragon tactics. New types of ships appeared from their formation, vessels designed specifically to counter dragon fire and human weapons. They learned fast, Hanul observed as they dodged a blast of dark energy that seemed to eat the light around it. "So do we," Dongmin replied, thinking of all the training sessions where human and dragon crews had practiced together. The turning point came when Elder Speaker Kate led a group of the oldest and most powerful dragons in a direct assault on the Devourer command ship. The massive biovessel was easily 10 times larger than any other enemy ship, its surface covered with weapon emplacements and defensive systems. But the ancient dragons had abilities that even their own people rarely saw. Working together, they created a field of pure destruction around the command ship, something that looked like controlled lightning but felt like the end of the world itself. The Devourer flagship tried to retreat, but it was too late. The ancient dragon fire reached deep into its core systems, and the entire massive vessel began to collapse in on itself like a dying star. With their command ship destroyed, the remaining Devourer forces scattered into hyperspace, fleeing from a battle they had expected to win easily. In the aftermath, as rescue ships searched for survivors and damage control teams began their work, Dongmin found himself back on the bridge of Sol Prime. Through the windows, he could see dragons circling in formation, their graceful movements a celebration of victory. Admiral Tae-jin approached him looking tired but satisfied. "The preliminary reports are better than we dared hope. We lost only 12 ships total, and most of their crews were rescued by dragon partners." "What about casualties?" Dongmin asked, surprisingly light. The dragons' ability to share damage through their bond connections kept losses much lower than projected. Dongmin felt Hanul's contentment. Through their connection, as the dragon played in zero gravity with several younger members of the flight, the victory was important, but even more important was the proof that humans and dragons could fight as true partners. This was just the first test, Admiral Taejin continued. Intelligence suggests the main Devourer fleet is still gathering strength at the galactic core. They will return with new tactics and more ships. Then we will be ready for them, Dongmin replied with quiet confidence. Together we are stronger than either species could be alone. The former janitor looked out at the combined fleet and smiled. A year ago he had been invisible and forgotten, just another maintenance worker keeping the station running. Now he was part of something larger than himself, something that might just save both their peoples from an ancient evil. But he also knew this was only the beginning. The real war was still to come. 2 years after the first Devourer attack, the Dragon Bond Training Academy on New Sol Station had become the most important facility in human space. What had once been empty storage areas and unused docking bays now buzzed with activity as humans and dragons learned to work together in ways that neither species had thought possible. Dongmin stood in the main training hall, watching the newest group of candidates practice basic communication with young dragons. He wore the uniform of a senior instructor now, but he still preferred to think of himself as simply someone who had learned to care for dragons. The fancy titles felt strange to him even after all this time. Instructor Park called trainee Oh Minho, a young pilot who had volunteered from the Space Force. My dragon partner keeps showing me images I cannot understand. Dongmin approached the pair, an enthusiastic young man and a dragon whose scales shifted between gold and copper in the training room's lights. He could immediately sense the problem through his bond with Hanul, who was resting nearby after their own training session. Dragons do not think in words like humans do, Dongmin explained patiently. They communicate through emotions, feelings, and shared experiences. Do not try to translate what Bitna is showing you. Instead, just feel what the images mean and respond with your own emotions. He watched as Minho closed his eyes and relaxed, letting go of his need to understand everything logically. Gradually, both the young man and his dragon partner became calmer, as real communication began to flow between them. This was the part of his new life that Dongmin enjoyed most. Each successful bond between human and dragon made both species stronger and safer. In 2 years, they had trained over 400 bonded pairs, creating a force that no enemy had been able to match. Through his connection with Hanul, Dongmin felt his partner's approach before he heard the familiar sound of large wings. The dragon had grown even more magnificent over the years, now easily the size of a small aircraft, but still as graceful as when they had first met in that maintenance tunnel. The patrol reports are ready, Hanul communicated as they landed softly in the training area. Sujin's wing found no signs of Devourer activity in the outer systems. That is good news, Dongmin replied, both aloud and through their mental connection. But we cannot become overconfident. The enemy is still out there planning their next move. Admiral Kim Tae-jin entered the training hall for the daily briefing, his presence commanding immediate attention from all the trainees. The integration between human and dragon forces had made him one of the most respected military leaders in known space. Status report on the new recruits, the Admiral requested. 23 new bonded pairs. Completed basic training this week, Dongmin reported. That brings our total active force to 412 pairs. Elder Speaker Kite estimates we need at least 600 pairs to safely defend our core systems. And the new ship designs? Flight leader Sujin entered the conversation, her living armor shifting colors as she moved. The hybrid vessels are performing beyond all expectations. Human engineering combined with dragon energy systems has created ships that are both powerful and adaptable. The fusion of human technology with dragon abilities had produced remarkable results. Ships that could heal themselves when damaged, weapons that adapted to different types of enemies, and shields that grew stronger under attack. Most importantly, every ship was designed to accommodate bonded pairs, allowing human and dragon crews to work together seamlessly. What about the Devourer threat? Admiral Tae-jin asked. Kite's ancient voice carried easily across the training hall as the elder speaker joined their group. Our deep space scouts report movement near the galactic core. The enemy is massing for another major offensive, but they appear to be taking much longer to prepare than expected. Why the delay? Dongmin asked. They are studying us, Kite explained gravely. The Devourers have never faced bonded forces before. They are trying to understand how our partnership works so they can develop counters to it. It was a sobering thought. The Devourers were an ancient enemy with thousands of years of experience in consuming civilizations. Their ability to adapt and learn from each encounter was legendary among the older dragon flights, but something had changed in the last 2 years. For the first time in centuries, the Devourers had been forced to retreat and reconsider their tactics. The bond between humans and dragons had created something they could not easily understand or counter. There is something else, Sujin added. Our intelligence network has detected other species beginning to form similar partnerships. The bird-like Aryans have started working with the crystalline Nexari. The aquatic pelagics are sharing technology with the gas giant dwellers of the Jovian collective. Admiral Taejin looked surprised. Other species are copying our alliance? Word spreads quickly through the galaxy, Kaite said with what might have been pride. When others see that cooperation can defeat an enemy that has terrorized the galaxy for millennia, they begin to reconsider their own isolation. Dongmin felt a warm glow of satisfaction through his bond with Hanul. What had started as a simple act of kindness toward an injured creature had grown into something that might change the entire galaxy. The Devourers have always succeeded because they faced divided, frightened species fighting alone, Kaite continued. But if the galaxy learns to work together, to form bonds across species lines, then even the ancient enemy can be defeated. As the briefing concluded and the others departed, Dongmin remained in the training hall with Hanul. Through the large windows, he could see the combined human-dragon fleet conducting exercises in the space around the station. Ships from both species moved in perfect coordination, their crews sharing knowledge and trust that would have been impossible just a few years ago. Do you think we can really defeat them? Dongmin asked his partner. The Devourers have been destroying civilizations for thousands of years. Hanul's response came not in words but in a flood of shared emotions and memories. The warmth of their first meeting when Dongmin had chosen to help rather than ignore. The joy of discovery as two very different species learned to understand each other. The fierce satisfaction of fighting side by side against a common enemy. Together, all things are possible, Hanul finally communicated in the mixture of feelings and images that had become their primary language. You taught me that when you chose to save a small hurt creature instead of walking away. Dongmin smiled as he stroked his partner's neck, feeling the familiar rhythm of two hearts beating in harmony. Outside the windows, the stars continued their eternal dance, but now they seemed less cold and distant. Throughout the galaxy, different species were learning to work together, to form bonds that transcended old fears and prejudices. The former janitor had become something he never could have imagined, a bridge between worlds, a teacher of cooperation and a guardian of hope. But in his heart, he was still the same person who had heard a small cry for help in a dark tunnel and chosen to respond with kindness. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever new threats the Devourers might devise, Dongmin knew that the galaxy was no longer the same place it had been when species fought alone and afraid. The age of cooperation had begun, and it had started with one human showing compassion to one lost dragon in the depths of a space station. As the two friends watched the stars together, both of them knew that their greatest adventures were still to come.